Today we're going to learn about straw weaving. This one is one that one of my students made last year for me that they created at their home, and it's made with one kind of yarn that has a bunch of different colors in it, tape, and straws. So here's how you can do it. You can just use some regular straws from the grocery store. We need tape, we need scissors, yarn, maybe even another kind of yarn too, and something to write with. First up, you're going to need 2 straws for each person making a straw weaving. You don't want your straws to be able to bend, so you need to cut off the bending part. You're also going to need 2 pieces of tape. Masking tape works best. And you're going to need a really plain kind of yarn for the base. I like to measure out about the length of the long side of a table at school, but for this one I'm going to make it a little bit shorter. I would say that usually when my students do this, their yarn is about 2 feet long. So I need 2 strings about the same length. Then I'm going to take one of the pieces of yarn and feed it through the straw. Once it comes out the other side, you're going to fold it over, get one of the pieces of masking tape, and put it on there like it's a little flag. Make sure that you wrap it up really tightly. If you have a lot of bumps and lumps on this tape, it can make weaving really difficult. So you want this to be really smooth. If you touch it a bunch of times, it won't be sticky anymore. So try not to touch the sticky side. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the other straw with the other piece of yarn. Now, one thing that kids sometimes mess up on with this is they will try to put this end of the yarn through this other one. And what we want to remember is that each of these are separate. So I have one straw here with its piece of tape and yarn, and one over here with its own piece of yarn. I need to smooth that out a little bit, and then I'm going to write my name on it. You can use a Sharpie or some other kind of pen. I say write your name on both pieces of tape so that if it's hard to read one of them, then maybe you can read the other one better. So I'm writing Mrs. Phillips because that's my name. Then I'm going to take both of the straws, and they are now best friends. They're going to be together forever. I'm going to take the tails of them and smooth them out until I get to the end. I'm going to make a knot right here by looping it up to make a circle and stick the little pieces through the circle and pull, and I want my knot to land down as close to the bottom as I can. One of the pieces of yarn is longer than the other, so I'll just trim it off. So now I have correctly set up my loom. A loom is what you weave on. Now I'm ready to weave. You can continue to weave with the same color of yarn that you used before, or you're welcome to use a different color of yarn. I've decided to use this kind of fuzzy, multicolored yarn. So traditionally in a classroom, you would go ahead and cut off a piece of yarn a little bit longer than your arm, but because I am just doing this by myself, I'm going to keep it on the ball of yarn and just continually use the same color for a really long time. So I'm going to hold the straws in the hand that I don't write with. I write with this hand, so I'm going to be using the other hand to hold the straws. I'm going to put the end of the yarn in between the straws and hold it with my thumb. My thumb is going to be my little buddy today. It's going to help me with a lot of weaving. So it's going to hold it right there. I'm going to go around the first straw and in between, around the second straw and in between, around the first straw, in between, around the second straw, in between. Every now and then I'm going to push it down. If I'm doing it right, it's going to look like I have bump, bump. If I'm doing it wrong, that would be when I'm wrapping it around both pieces of, or both of the straws and not going in between. And you can see that when I'm doing it wrong, it just looks like a line going across the whole thing. So I need to take that off and try that part again. Around the first straw, around the second straw. And it should look the same on both sides. Bump, bump. I'm going to keep doing this. Every now and then, I'm going to have to push it down a little bit because when it gets to the top of my straws, I have to push it down. Once I've sort of filled up the straws, I'm going to have to start pushing it off the straws a little bit so that I can keep going. If one of your straws gets taller than the other one, you can just push them both up a little bit. Now I'm really starting to come off the straws. See down here at the end? You might get worried when you see it starting to hang off because there's not a knot here at the end, but I promise you this yarn is really strong and it can hang off this cliff right here and it will not mess up unless you start to pull on it, and that will mess it up. So if yours kind of gets down here like this and you're really worried about it, all you have to do is just take your 2 fingers here and push it back up. I'm going to push this down a little bit more so I have some more room to keep weaving. And I'm going to keep doing that for a long time. Another thing that we don't want to do while we're weaving is we want to make sure that we're pulling it tight every time. Sometimes students have a little loop hanging out like this, and when you get toward the end of your weaving, it just looks messy if you have it like this. So make sure that you're pulling it tight every time so that you don't have that problem. You also want to make sure you don't push it all the way off the straws before you're ready. So you always should have some of it on the straws. When you feel like your weaving is complete, you're going to cut it off from the ball of yarn and just tuck it in as much as it will go. Then you're going to push your weaving all the way down to the end of the yarn. This is the only time you're allowed to push it all the way off the straws, because once it goes off the straws, it can't go back on them. Once it gets down to the bottom, it's going to look kind of like a bumpy caterpillar, and that's not what you want. You want it to be nice and smooth and straight, so you're going to have to kind of flatten it back out a little bit. But we don't want to see all of these black pieces of yarn shining through. So just make it nice and smooth and straight. When you're feeling pretty good about that, you can go ahead and cut off the straws over here. I like to cut it right under the straws because that way I have plenty of yarn to tie with. If I cut it right here, I'm not going to be able to tie a knot right there. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, make a circle, put the little end through the circle, and I want to pull it as close to the weaving as I can. Now is a good time to cut off any little tails like this. Just make sure you don't cut up your weaving at the same time. I also have a little bit of a tail here at the other end. I do not want to cut these two strings that are holding the whole thing together. That will make the whole weaving fall apart. So hear that, kids? Never ever cut the two that are running through here. Teachers, if a student does this, then you need to go ahead and try to save whatever's left by tying a knot right there, and then the leftover is just going to have to go in the trash. So be careful. All right, then the last thing I'm going to do is maybe even up the ends. So notice this one is a lot longer than the other one. And then I can decide what I want to do with it. So maybe I want this to be a necklace. So I could put it around my head. This is a little short for a necklace, but if it was longer, then it could work for that. This could be a really cool double bracelet. I could have a friend help tie it on me. This could be a belt if it was a lot longer, or I could tie it on as a headband. So you can also just come up with a bunch of different ideas of how you're going to use your weaving. And let's look at a couple of other examples of different weavings as well. This is one where a student used a bunch of different colors, and I really like that one because I like all of the different colors and stripes that they used. This is another one that I made before using the same technique that I just showed you, and instead of using 2 straws, I used 7 straws. So you can see all 7 of the little strings that are from my loom, and it was a lot harder to hold that one, but I think you can agree it made a really nice scarf. And I probably used a whole ball of yarn to do that. So I hope you have fun with this. You can make your own accessories and maybe even teach a friend how to do it too.